Welcome to the Nodding Hour. Find a comfortable position, let your eyes grow heavy, and allow these quiet stories to carry you gently off to sleep. The armchair has been here a long time. Its fabric, a faded olive green, has softened with years of use into something that gives way completely the moment you settle into it. There is no resistance, just the quiet accommodation of something well broken in. The cushion behind your head has taken the shape of whoever sat here before you, and now it takes yours, and the difference is entirely undetectable. The arms of the chair are wide and slightly worn at the edges, where hands have rested over many evenings, exactly like this one. And the fabric there has a different texture than the rest. Smoother, more compressed. The result of years of the same small, repeated contact. The fire is established. Not new, not struggling. It has been burning long enough to find its rhythm. Flames move across the surface of the logs in slow, unhurried paths. Amber at the edges, a deeper orange at the heart, and at the very base where the heat is most concentrated, an occasional pale blue that appears and vanishes without announcement, there and then gone, like a thought that passes through without requiring anything. The wood shifts now and then, a soft sound, almost nothing. Then quiet again, and the fire continues as if nothing interrupted it, which nothing did. The logs themselves have been burning long enough to develop a gray crust of ash along their upper surfaces, while their cores remain orange and alive, and this combination of ash, and ember, an occasional small flame, is what the fire looks like at its most settled and most comfortable. Rain against the window. It has been falling for hours, and carries no intention of stopping. The glass is faintly fogged at the edges, the condensation softening the darkness outside into something formless and distant. The world beyond the cottage reduced to nothing in particular, nothing that requires any attention. The rain hits the glass in no particular rhythm, sometimes a little heavier when a gust moves through, sometimes easing back to almost nothing, always present, always the same essential sound beneath its variations. A sound that has been part of the room's atmosphere for so long this evening that it has become indistinguishable from silence, or rather, has become a kind of silence of its own. A filled and textured quiet that is in some ways more restful than the absence of sound would be. The mug rests on the small table to your right, still warm. Both hands wrap around it, and the heat distributes slowly across your palms and into your fingers, spreading up through the wrists and into the forearms in a gradual and very pleasant way. The ceramic is smooth against the palms, slightly rough around the rim, where the glaze has worn slightly thin over years of use. The tea is mild, slightly sweet, not too strong. Exactly the right temperature for slow sipping rather than quick drinking. Cool enough to take a proper mouthful without thinking about it, but warm enough to feel it all the way down. The first sip settles something. Some small held tension in the chest releases without fanfare, without announcement, without requiring any particular attention. And the mug goes back to the table, and the hands stay near it for a moment longer than necessary, unwilling to give up the warmth entirely, resting lightly against the ceramic, and feeling the heat diminish very slowly through the walls of the cup. Nothing is expected of you here. The room is low-ceilinged and unhurried. Stone walls, pale gray. The mortar between them worn smooth over what must be a very long time. Centuries, perhaps, or something close to it. The stones themselves uneven in their dimensions, no two quite the same shape or size. Fitted together by someone long gone with a patience and a skill, and a particular understanding of how stone bears weight that the walls still testify to, without requiring anyone to notice. A lamp in the far corner throws amber light across the room, light that is warm and slightly orange, and that softens before it reaches the far edges of the room, losing itself in the comfortable shadow of the corners. The corners are dim, comfortably so, the kind of darkness that asks nothing of you and offers everything in return, the permission to be unobserved, to be simply here without performing anything for anyone, to let the face settle into whatever expression it naturally takes when nobody is watching, which turns out to be no expression in particular, just a face at rest. Breathing slows without your noticing. The chest rises and falls at a pace that belongs to this room rather than to the day that came before it. The day has receded. It is not gone exactly. It still exists somewhere in the background, its various contents still technically present. But it has moved to a very comfortable distance and is making no demands, requiring nothing, content to wait until morning when it will be relevant again, which it is not now. A bookshelf runs along the wall to the right. The titles are unreadable from here in the low light. Just spines of varying thickness and color standing in their quiet row. Some fat and some thin, some with gold lettering just catching the firelight, and most with nothing catching at all. Some are cracked along their backs from having been opened many times by many hands. Some look barely touched, their spines pristine and straight, waiting for the right reader on the right evening. A few are lying flat on top of the upright ones, placed there temporarily at some point in the past, and never quite returned to their proper positions. Their covers facing upward, their titles readable if you were close enough and interested enough, which you are not right now. All of them patient in the warm half-light, waiting for some other evening, some other hand reaching out, without quite knowing what it is looking for, some other hour, when they will be needed and taken down and opened. The flagstone floor holds the heat of the fire and radiates it upward in a way you feel through your socks, not hot, just warm. The particular warmth of stone that has been heated slowly over hours and gives it back slowly in return. A generous and unhurried exchange that has been going on all evening and will continue for hours after the fire itself has gone to embers and then to cold ash. A rug covers most of the floor, woven in muted reds and browns, its pattern worn softest in the center where it has borne the most warmth and the most feet over the most years. The colors there faded to something gentler and more complex than the original. The threads compressed into a surface that is almost smooth in the center and gradually more textured toward the edges. The edges of the rug are slightly curled, lifting away from the stone in small, unhurried protests that nobody has got around to addressing and that give the rug lived in, unself-conscious quality that a flat and perfectly maintained rug could never quite achieve. The ceiling draws the eye upward, dark oak beams, low and heavy, running the full length of the room parallel to one another, at intervals of perhaps 2 feet, their surfaces rough-hewn and darkened with age to something close to black in the dimmer parts, and a deep warm brown where the firelight reaches them. Between the beams the plaster is slightly uneven, not dramatically so, not the uneven plaster of neglect, but the gentle irregularity of old work done by hand. The plasterer's tool leaving traces of its passage in the surface that set and hardened, and have remained as they are for a very long time. The firelight catches every small hill and hollow in the surface and makes the ceiling move in the slowest possible way. Shadows shifting as the fire shifts. The whole ceiling a very slow and very quiet animation that you only notice when you have stopped looking for anything in particular, and your eyes have gone soft, and your attention has spread out to include everything without focusing on anything. The rain intensifies for a moment. A heavier gust presses against the glass with more force than the rain has been using all evening. The sound of it sharpening briefly into something more present, and then easing back as the gust passes, returning to the steady background rhythm it has maintained for hours. The fire responds to some small movement of air from the chimney, lifting briefly, the flames taller for a moment, the room brighter and more orange, the shadows on the ceiling more pronounced and more quickly moving, and then settling again, lower and steadier, back to the register it prefers, the calm and self-sufficient burn of a fire that has long since stopped trying to impress anyone. Fingers adjust on the mug without intention. The thumb finds the small imperfection in the glaze near the rim. A slight roughness, a place where the glaze thinned during firing, and left the clay beneath it just slightly exposed, and rests there, having found it before, knowing it without looking for it. The ceramic has cooled a little more since the last sip. Not cold, just less warm than it was. The tea is more than half gone now. The taste of it is familiar in the way that only very simple things manage to be familiar. Not because of memory exactly, but because of a quality in the thing itself, a straightforwardness, a reliability, a persistence in being exactly what it is, regardless of everything else. The room carries a faint smell of wood smoke and something herbal. A small bunch of dried flowers hangs from one of the ceiling beams directly above. Lavender, perhaps, or something close to it. Something that was cut in some other season. Some warmer and brighter time when the garden outside was producing more than bare wet earth, and has been hanging here drying slowly ever since, its color fading from whatever vivid thing it once was to the pale gray purple it is now, its moisture leaving it gradually over weeks and months until what remains is concentrated and dry and very faint. The scent of it only announces itself when everything else has gone quiet, which it entirely has, and even then it is not so much a smell as a quality of the air, a suggestion of something sweet and dry that is gone the moment you try to focus on it, and present again the moment you stop trying. A log settles deeper into the grate with a low sound. Not loud, nothing in this room is loud this evening, just the sound of something finding a slightly different position, shifting its weight, making a small adjustment. A brief shower of sparks rises from the disturbance, orange points of light lifting from the disrupted embers, rising an inch or two, extinguishing each in its own time, before any of them reach the stone of the fireplace above. The flames rearrange around the new configuration of the wood, finding new surfaces to travel across, new angles of approach, new paths that the changed shape of the fuel makes available to them, adjusting without effort, continuing without interruption. The fire is entirely indifferent to the settling of the log, and entirely capable of incorporating it, which it does, and then continues as before. There is no need to move. The stone walls are very thick. You become aware of this not through sight, but through a kind of feeling, the sense of mass on every side, of something substantial and ancient standing between you and the weather outside, between you and the dark and the cold and the wet world beyond these walls. The cottage has been doing this for a very long time. Not just this evening, not just this winter, but through every kind of weather this particular hillside has produced for however many centuries, these walls have been standing here, doing exactly this, holding warmth in, holding cold out, providing the interior that is their entire purpose, and that they perform without complaint and without requiring any acknowledgement. The walls do not care whether you notice them. They continue regardless. The mug is nearly empty now. The warmth lives almost entirely in the ceramic, rather than in whatever remains of the liquid. The hands stay around it anyway, having learned the shape of it over the course of this evening, comfortable with its weight, comfortable with the way the heat has diminished through its walls from warm to cool, and is now something closer to room temperature, which in this room means something closer to warm than cool. Outside, the rain continues its long, patient falling, indifferent to the hour, indifferent to anything. Inside, the fire continues its long, patient burning, doing what fire does for as long as the fuel lasts and then stopping, which is not yet, not for a long time yet. The lamp holds its corner in steady amber. The room holds its warmth. The evening holds everything gently in place without asking anything in return. Shoulders have dropped further than they were an hour ago. The dropping happened in stages, small releases at intervals that were not noticed at the time they occurred, each one moving the shoulders a little further from the ears, a little closer to where they belong when nothing is required of them. The body has been making its own arrangements throughout this evening, quietly and without consultation, settling into the chair and into the warmth, and into the particular quality of this room with a patience and a thoroughness that the conscious mind could not have managed if it had tried. The last of the tea goes down slowly. There is no particular reason to finish it now, rather than later. The mug could sit on the table half drunk until morning, and nothing would be different. But the hands bring it to the mouth, and the last of it goes down, in a slow, deliberate sip that is as much about the ritual as the liquid, the completion of a small and pleasant thing. The mug settles back on the table with almost no sound, a small, soft contact between ceramic and wood that the room absorbs without registering. Hands rest in the lap, open, still. No longer holding anything, no longer needing to hold anything. The fire is lower than it was when the evening began. The logs have burned through their outer layers, and what remains at their hearts glows with a deeper and quieter heat, not the lively heat of new fire, but the settled heat of something that has been burning for a long time and has found its way to a more fundamental level of itself. A heat that radiates steadily outward, without the variability of flame, constant and reliable and warm. The light it throws has changed accordingly. Warmer in color, less bright, more amber than orange. A light that illuminates the room differently than it did earlier, making the room feel slightly smaller and more interior, more gathered in around the fire and the chair and the lamp, the edges of the room having receded into a shadow that is entirely comfortable and asks nothing. The room feels later than it did. Eyes rest on the fire without following it anywhere in particular, without asking it to do anything or be anything other than what it is. The movement of the flames, what remains of them, above the glowing body of the embers, is slow and unhurried. Small flames that rise and fall without urgency, that respond to invisible currents in the air, with a flexibility and an ease that is very pleasant to watch, without watching, to be aware of, without being focused on. The fire simply continues. It has been continuing all evening, and will continue for some time yet, and then it will stop, and that will be fine too. But that is not now. The rain against the glass has settled into its most consistent rhythm of the evening. No longer varying, no longer gusting, just a steady and even presence, a sound that is so regular, it has become part of the silence rather than a disruption of it. The fire and the rain together fill the acoustic space of the room with something that is neither loud nor quiet, but simply present, layered, sufficient. The sound of an evening that is entirely self-contained and entirely at ease with itself. The clock on the mantelpiece ticks. A small brass clock with a white enamel face and hands so thin, they are nearly invisible at this distance in this light. The tick is soft and very regular. You become aware of it now, the way you become aware of things when everything else has settled sufficiently, not as a new sound, but as something that has been present all along, and is only now audible, because everything that was louder, or more demanding, has quieted. The hands have moved further around the face than you might have expected. The evening is further advanced than it felt. This is always the way in warm and quiet rooms. Heaviness in the eyes now. Not unpleasant, not the heaviness of tiredness that fights against what you need to do, but the heaviness of a body that has found its way to the end of a day and is making its request in the most straightforward and honest way available to it. The eyelids are heavier than they were an hour ago. The effort of keeping them open, which earlier required no effort at all, now requires a small and consistent effort. A gentle maintenance that is itself a kind of pleasure, because of what it means, because of where it points. The warmth has gathered around you completely. It is not coming from any single source now. Not just from the fire, not just from the flagstones, not just from the thick walls that have been absorbing the fire's heat all evening and are now radiating it back in their slow and thorough way, but from all of these together, and from the room itself, from the particular quality of a small, enclosed space that has been warm for many hours, a warmth that has worked its way into every surface and every corner, and is now simply the condition of being here. The atmosphere of the place, something you are inside of rather than something being applied to you from outside. The chair holds you completely. The cushion, the back, the wide arms, all of it accommodating the weight and the shape of you, with the undemanding ease of something that has been doing this for a very long time and asks nothing in return. The body has stopped making any adjustments. Earlier in the evening, there were small shifts, small searches for a better position. The unconscious negotiation between body and furniture that happens in the first hour or so of sitting somewhere. That has been over for a long time. The body has found what it needs and stopped looking. Thoughts have grown slow. They arrive less frequently now and with less insistence than they had at the beginning of the evening. each one appearing at the edge of awareness and then drifting away before it fully forms, dissolving back into the warm air of the room without having required any particular response, without leaving any particular mark. The space between thoughts has grown wider. The quality of that space is not emptiness exactly, it is not nothing, but something more like the quality of this room, warm and dim and self-sufficient. A space that is complete in itself without needing to contain anything in particular. The lamp in the corner holds its steady amber light. It has not flickered or varied all evening. It simply continues, as reliable as the walls, as patient as the fire, as constant as the rain outside, each of these things doing what it does, without reference to any of the others, each sufficient in itself, together making the room what it is this evening, which is warm and dim and quiet and entirely sufficient. The fire has settled into mostly embers now. The logs are reduced to their cores, dark on the outside with a thin crust of gray ash, and glowing orange and deep red within, their internal light pulsing very slightly, with some invisible rhythm, brightening and dimming in a slow and steady alternation that mirrors the breath without having planned to. The two of them, fire and breath, occupying the same quiet frequency at the end of a long evening. The light the embers give is different from the light the fire gave earlier. Gentler, more even, without the variability of flame, a warm and constant glow that asks nothing of the eyes and offers nothing dramatic. Just warmth and color and the quiet evidence of something continuing. The shadows at the edges of the room have deepened to something close to black. The bookshelf is invisible now, its spines lost in the darkness. The books present but not visible, existing in the room as a fact rather than as a sight. The ceiling is almost entirely in shadow. The beams gone, the uneven plaster gone. Just darkness above with the faintest orange tinge from the embers reflected upward. The room has contracted around the fire and the lamp and the chair, becoming smaller and more intimate than it was when the evening began, which is exactly right. Nothing is required. There is no next thing. The cottage is sealed against the night outside, against the rain and the dark and the cold, and all the various contents of the world beyond these thick gray walls, as it has been sealed against whatever was outside on every other evening. It has stood here, which is a very great number of evenings. The fire will continue in its diminished way for some hours yet, before it goes entirely to ash. The rain will continue until it stops, which will be when it stops. The clock will mark the hours until morning without needing any assistance or any witness. Breath is slow, hands are open and still in the lap. The weight of the evening, all of it, the fire and the tea and the rain and the warmth and the long patient quiet, has settled over everything softly and completely, like something that has been approaching all evening and has now arrived without any particular announcement, without any particular moment of arrival that could be pointed to, just here now, present, the natural conclusion of this particular sequence of warmth and stillness and time passing in a small room with thick walls while rain falls outside. The embers glow their deep and patient orange. The rain whispers its steady whisper against the glass. The clock marks its soft seconds in the warm, dim room. The dried lavender above stirs very slightly in some imperceptible current of warm air rising from the embers, its faint sweetness present for a moment and then gone, absorbed back into the warmth of the room that contains everything this evening, that has been containing everything all evening, that will continue to contain everything until morning. Comes slowly through the fogged glass of the small window, and the fire is cold ash, and the rain has passed, and a new day begins, which is not yet, which is a long time away, which is not now. The chair holds you. The room holds the chair. The walls hold the room. The night holds the walls. And somewhere between one breath and the next, without any decision being made, without any particular moment that could be called the moment of crossing over, the evening folds itself gently and quietly and completely into dark, into rest, into the deep and patient and entirely sufficient silence of a small warm room at the end of a long and quiet night. Rain has been running down the tall arched windows for the better part of an hour. It moves in slow, uneven lines, each one finding its own path without reference to the others, branching occasionally into two, where the glass has some invisible irregularity that diverts the flow, merging occasionally, where two lines happen to converge. None of them in any hurry, none of them going anywhere in particular, except down, which is where they are going, which is enough. Outside is dark and wet and unappealing in every visible way. In here the lamps are on, and the radiator along the far wall ticks its steady tick, and the books stand in their rows, and the air carries the particular smell of old paper and settled time, and everything is exactly as it should be on a wet Tuesday evening in a small village library that has been quietly being itself for longer than anyone currently alive in this village can clearly remember. The building is old. Stone, like most of the village, built when stone was the available material and the obvious choice, and has been demonstrating the soundness of that choice ever since, through every kind of weather this particular valley produces. High ceilings that make the room feel larger than its footprint suggests. Thick walls that hold warmth the way old walls do. Not efficiently, not in a way that would satisfy a modern assessment of thermal performance, but thoroughly in a way that the body understands and responds to. A warmth that feels earned and permanent rather than mechanical. The warmth of a space that has been heated and inhabited for a long time, and has absorbed the evidence of it into its fabric. Tall arched windows along the front wall that during the day admit a great deal of light, and now in the evening hold the lamplight in, and reflect the room back at itself in the glass, showing the room as it is from the outside. A warm lit interior surrounded by nothing, a container of light in a dark and wet evening. It is 10 minutes to closing time. The last borrower left 20 minutes ago. A man in a green waterproof jacket. Not a regular, someone passing through perhaps, who returned a single book and stood for a moment at the new arrival shelf, without taking anything before leaving, pulling the door closed behind him with unnecessary care. The librarian is in the back room now. The sounds from back there are very quiet and intermittent. The soft impact of a rubber stamp. A drawer opening and closing with the particular sound of a drawer that has been opened and closed thousands of times in the same way. A brief rustling of papers, then quieter still, then nothing audible at all. The main room is entirely yours. Table lamps rather than overhead lighting. Each one sits on a reading table and throws its pool of warm, yellow light onto the table surface. The wood grain visible and warm-looking in that light. A returned book sitting at a slight angle, waiting to be reshelved. The surface of the table itself, smooth and slightly worn in the areas where readers have rested their arms over years of sitting here. Between the lamps, the light fades gradually, the shelves along the walls receding into a comfortable dimness at the edges of the room that is not darkness, exactly, but a softening. A gentle uncertainty about what is there that feels appropriate, rather than inadequate, inviting rather than excluding. The chair near the window is the one you chose when you came in, pulled slightly away from its table to face more toward the window, positioned so that the lamp is to the left and the window is in front, the rain visible on the glass from here, the outside dark and featureless beyond it. The chair's cushion has compressed over years of sitting into something that receives you with minimal resistance, that accommodates the weight and shape of you without pushing back, that gives the impression of having been expecting you. In front of you on the table is a book picked up from the nearest shelf without particular intention. A novel with a slightly faded spine, its cover illustration a landscape of some kind in colors that have softened over time into something more muted and more interesting than they probably were when the book was new. The pages have been turning slowly for some time now, not quite reading, just turning, just feeling the slight resistance of the paper and the way the pages have softened at their corners from previous hands, just being here in this warm and quiet room on this wet evening, standing eventually. The chair offers a small resistance as you rise from it, the cushion springing back into a slightly less compressed version of the shape you made in it. The nearest shelf is only a few steps away. One finger trails along a row of spines, not looking for anything, just making contact, feeling the variations in texture, cloth and paper, and plastic-covered paper, some rough and some smooth, some slightly sticky with age, some perfectly dry and clean. The sound the finger makes as it passes from one spine to the next is a sound that belongs entirely and exclusively to libraries, to rows of books touched by someone not looking for anything in particular, a papery whisper that is one of the quietest sounds in the world, and also one of the most recognizable. A novel stops the hand. Its cover is a faded illustration, pale cliffs, a gray sea, the light in the illustration suggesting early morning or late afternoon, that uncertain time. The back cover gets read in the lamplight, slowly. The sentences of description and the quote from a review, in a publication that no longer exists. The kind of recommendation that was given before anyone knew whether the book would last or not. It went back to its place on the shelf. The radiator along the far wall ticks its soft and steady tick, the sound of metal expanding slightly against its fittings as the hot water moves through it. A sound that is so regular, it functions as a kind of background rhythm for the room, present beneath everything else, marking time in its own modest way. The lamp on the nearest table hums at a frequency that is almost below hearing, not a sound so much as a very slight vibration in the air near it, something that would not be noticeable in a louder place and is only present now, because the room is quiet enough to accommodate it. The smell of the room is layered. Old paper at the surface, something faintly dusty beneath that. The dust of old books is different from other kinds of dust, drier and sweeter, the product of paper aging slowly in the presence of a particular kind of light. And below both of those, a deeper smell that is harder to name. Something that might be the wood of the shelves or the particular quality of air that circulates in a room full of books over many years. An atmosphere that has been building since the library opened, and that is now as much a part of the building as the stone walls or the arched windows. The local history section is toward the back of the room, where the shelves are slightly older, their wood a deeper color, their finish worn to something that is almost bare in places along the edges, and the books less uniform in their presentation than the main fiction and nonfiction sections. Proper published volumes with professional spines stand alongside spiral-bound pamphlets produced in small print runs by local historical societies. Their covers designed by someone who is an expert in history and not particularly concerned with graphic design, which gives them a quality that is entirely their own, slightly improvised, slightly earnest, entirely committed to their subject. A slim volume about the village comes off the shelf. It is light in the hands, its pages not quite stiff enough to hold themselves flat without help. The kind of book that requires both hands or a table to read properly. Black and white photographs on alternating pages, each one captioned in small type below. The main square in 1920. The road surface unpaved and uneven. The stones of it visible, irregular, worn into channels by years of cartwheels and horse hooves. A horse and cart visible at the far left edge of the frame. The horse's head turned slightly away. The cart driver not visible. Just the cart and the horse's flank and the beginning of the wheel. A woman in a long dark coat standing at the far end of the square. Her posture straight. Her face turned toward the camera, but her eyes perhaps not quite meeting it. Her expression neutral or perhaps slightly impatient, already somewhere else in her thoughts. On her way somewhere, captured at a moment between other moments. The library building itself photographed at some point in the 1930s. The same stone face, unmistakably. The same building, but with slightly different windows, and a handwritten sign above the door, and a bicycle leaning against the wall below it. Its owner somewhere inside. The bicycle waiting with the particular patience of bicycles left outside buildings on ordinary days. The photographs hold the attention in a way that text does not quite do. Something about their specificity, their irreversibility, These exact people, this exact light falling at this exact angle, this exact arrangement of the world on this exact day that is now entirely unrepeatable and available nonetheless, present here in this slim volume on this shelf, accessible to anyone who takes the book down and opens it. The pages turn all the way to the end. The final photograph is of a group of children on the library steps, 12 or so of them, arranged in 2 rows. The back row standing and the front row sitting, taken presumably on some occasion that warranted a photograph. A founding day or an anniversary, or simply a day when someone had a camera and thought to use it. Some of the children looked directly at the camera with the serious expressions that children adopted for photographs in that era, understanding that a photograph was a formal occasion requiring a formal expression. Some looked slightly to one side. One child at the far right of the front row is caught in the process of turning away, already uninterested, already somewhere else. The book closes carefully. It goes back to its place on the shelf. The chair near the window receives you again, accommodating you as before, the cushion settling around you without fuss. The rain has intensified during the time in the history section. It runs down the arched windows now, in continuous streams rather than the branching lines of earlier, each pane of glass carrying several unbroken lines of water from top to bottom. The outside world even less visible than it was. The library more completely sealed against the evening and the weather. More fully interior, more entirely itself, than it was an hour ago when the last borrower was still present. The books in their rows. Every wall of this room lined with them from waist height to ceiling. 3 long shelves running through the center of the room in addition. Thousands of volumes in total. The accumulated product of however many years of acquisition and donation and careful selection, all of it arranged by the Dewey Decimal System, into a particular order that is arbitrary in the sense that any order is arbitrary and meaningful in the sense that it allows things to be found and returned and found again, that it gives the books a place and keeps them in it, that it makes the library navigable and therefore useful and therefore worth having. All those words, all those particular arrangements of words that someone believed in enough to spend years on, that a publisher believed in enough to invest in, that whoever built this collection believed in enough to include. Standing in the warm light, making no demands on anyone. Patient. Hands rest flat on the table. Palms down, fingers slightly spread. Feeling the smooth warmth of the wood under the palms. The lamp to the left is warm on the side of the face. The rain on the windows is the sound of this particular evening, and no other. Breathing is even and slow. The warmth of the room has worked its way into everything by now. Into the shoulders, which have dropped and are staying down, into the hands, which have stopped holding anything, and are resting because resting is what they need, and what is available, and what the room makes possible. Whatever mild alertness the presence of other people earlier in the evening required has entirely dissolved now that the room is empty, leaving something looser and more open, attention spread wide and resting lightly on everything without focusing on anything in particular. The radiator ticks, the rain runs. The lamps hold their light. The books stand in their rows in the warm and quiet room, patient and available, waiting without urgency for tomorrow, and whoever comes through the door, and whatever they need, which will be something different from what you needed this evening, which was simply to be here, in this warm room, on this wet evening, with the lamps and the rain and the books, and the particular quality of quiet that a library at closing time on a Tuesday provides, and that nothing else quite replicates. Time passes without particular announcement. The clock above the desk moves its hands. The rain on the windows continues its streaming. The radiator ticks its tick. The lamps hold their pools of yellow light on the table surfaces. Everything continues as it has been continuing, and there is no reason for anything to change, and nothing changes. And the room is very warm and very still, and the eyes are heavy, and the breath is slow. The librarian appears in the doorway that leads to the back room. She is wearing her coat now, her bag over one shoulder, her keys in her hand, the practical equipment of someone who is finished for the day and is ready to go home and is making this known in the gentlest possible way. Her expression is without impatience, the expression of someone at the end of a quiet and sufficient Tuesday who has done what needed to be done and is ready for the evening and the walk home, and whatever the evening holds, but who is in no particular hurry about the remaining few minutes of the day, and does not require you to be either. No rush, she says. Her voice is calibrated to the room, quiet, unhurried, warm enough to be a kindness. Whenever you're ready. The chair pushes back from the table with a soft scrape on the wooden floor. A sound that has been made in this room, by this chair or chairs like it thousands of times over the years of the library's existence. A sound that belongs here, that is part of the room's vocabulary. Things gathered from the table without hurry. A nod exchanged with the librarian. The small and sufficient acknowledgement of two people who have shared a quiet space for an evening, who have been companions in it without any interaction beyond this, which has been exactly enough. At the door a pause, the hand on the door handle. One look back at the room, the lamps still burning on the tables, each one its pool of warm yellow on the wood beneath it, the books in their rows along every wall and in the long central shelves, standing in their particular order, patient and available. The rain still on the windows, still running its lines down the glass. The empty chairs at the other tables, the impressions they hold of the people who sat in them throughout the day, already fading. The returned book still sitting at its slight angle on the nearest table, waiting for tomorrow and whoever reshelves it and wherever it goes. The reading glasses in their soft case, the radiator ticking its soft tick. The room warm and quiet and complete. Then out into the wet evening. The door closes behind you with a sound that is exactly what it should be. Solid and quiet and final, in the way that is not abrupt but complete. The sound of something being properly finished. Inside, the librarian moves through the room, switching off the lamps one by one. The room changes as each lamp goes out. The pools of light disappearing, the shelves receding further into shadow. The room becoming darker in stages, until only the last lamp remains, and then it too goes out, and the room is dark, lit only by what comes through the windows from the street lamp outside. A pale orange glow that reaches only a little way into the room and leaves most of it in genuine dark. The books stand in their rows in this darkness, unchanged, patient, exactly where they were. The radiator ticks on for a while, maintaining the warmth it has been maintaining all day, and then the thermostat reaches its night setting, and the ticking slows and stops, and the room begins its long, slow cooling toward morning. The rain continues against the windows. In the dark room, it sounds different than it did when the room was lit and occupied, more present, closer. The only sound now that the radiator has gone quiet and the people have left. It runs its lines down the glass, as it has been running them all evening, finding its own paths, branching where the glass directs it, merging where paths converge, in no hurry at all. Doing what rain does on windows in the dark, on a Tuesday evening, in a small village, which is simply to fall and to run, and to make that particular sound, and to continue until it stops. The books wait in their rows. The room holds its warmth for a while, and then begins to let it go, slowly. The heat moving out through the thick walls at the rate that thick walls allow, which is slow. Everything is still. Everything is at rest. The library holds its particular quiet. The quiet of a room full of books in the dark, which is one of the quietest things there is. A quiet that has accumulated over years of evenings exactly like this one, and that will continue to accumulate through every evening that follows, deepening very gradually, becoming over time something that is almost palpable, almost a presence of its own. The quiet of many years of books standing in the dark, waiting for the morning and the people and the light. The rain on the windows, the dark. The books, the long and patient and entirely sufficient quiet. Just past midnight. The village is completely dark, except for the street lamps, which stand at intervals along the main street, and throw their soft orange light down onto the wet pavement in overlapping circles that create a sequence of warm pools connected by slightly dimmer passages between them, like something luminous laid carefully along the road. A guide for anyone walking slowly through a sleeping place with no particular destination and no particular urgency, which is what this is. The rain stopped an hour ago. Everything it left behind is still entirely present. The road surface, dark and faintly reflective, catching the street lamp light, in long soft smears that shift slightly as you move past them. The garden walls with their patches of lichen and moss holding the moisture in small reservoirs along their upper surfaces. The roses drooping slightly over their low hedges with the particular heaviness of flowers that have accepted the weight of the rain and are resting in it now rather than fighting it. The parked cars along the curb with their bonnets and roofs catching the lamplight in broad and slightly blurred reflections. Each car a dark shape made slightly luminous on its upper surfaces by the wet that covers it. Everything damp, everything still, everything resting after the rain in the way that things rest after rain. Not asleep, not absent, just quiet and present and content to be wet and still. Footsteps on wet pavement. The sound they make is slightly different from footsteps on dry pavement. A little more contact, a little more presence in each step. A slight compression as the sole meets the wet surface and a slight release as it lifts. A sound that is somehow more substantial and more deliberate than the sound of walking on dry ground without actually being louder. No particular destination, no particular pace except a slow one. Just the village and the quiet and the cool night air, which carries the smell of rain and wet earth and wet stone and, from somewhere to the left, where a garden lies behind its wall, something faintly floral that has survived the evening and the weather, and is still offering itself quietly to the dark and to anyone who happens to pass. The houses on either side of the main street are old. Stone mostly, the same stone as the library building at the center of the village, and the pub at the corner, and the church at the far end, all of them built from the same gray-brown material, quarried from the same hillside at various points over several centuries. Their walls of varying thicknesses and their windows of varying sizes, but all of them recognizably from the same tradition, the same understanding of how to build a building that will stand in this particular landscape and weather this particular weather, and still be here in another few centuries, looking much as it does now. Small front gardens behind low walls or hedges, every window dark, every curtain drawn. The village is deeply and thoroughly asleep. Not the variable sleep of early evening, when people fall asleep in front of televisions and wake and go to bed, and the house passes through several stages of wakefulness and rest, but the committed sleep of midnight, settled and thorough, the kind that will not be disturbed by anything short of something real and urgent, which there is not. All those people in all those houses behind all those dark windows and drawn curtains, their breathing slow and even, their beds shaped to them after years of sleeping in the same position in the same bed, the mattress compressed into a particular topography that belongs to them specifically, that would feel wrong to anyone else. Their house is quiet around them in the way that only happens at this hour. Not the quiet of emptiness, but the quiet of deep occupation, the fullness of spaces that contain sleeping people, which is a different quality of quiet than any other, and one of the most peaceful. The pub at the corner where the main street curves to the left, its painted sign hanging motionless in the still air, a painted image of something, a bird or a local landmark, its details worn softer by seasons of weather than they were when the sign was new, its colors a degree or two more muted, its edges slightly softened, the windows dark, and the interior entirely invisible. The car park holds 2 cars left overnight, sitting on the gravel with the quiet permanence of objects that have been placed somewhere and are waiting to be reclaimed, their owners having made the sensible and entirely understandable decision, at some point during the evening, to leave them here and walk home or accept a lift, a decision that was the right one, and that the cars are now demonstrating the wisdom of by sitting here quietly in the dark. A hanging basket by the front door still holds its flowers. Late season flowers, their colors invisible in the dark, their shapes soft and irregular against the stone of the wall. A small domestic presence. The street curves to the left, and the feet follow it without deciding to, knowing the geometry of it, navigating the curve at the same pace and in the same direction as the road without any particular instruction being given or received. A cat appears from between two parked cars and stops directly under a street lamp, in the center of the pool of orange light, and regards you. Its eyes have found the light and are holding it. Two small points of amber in the dark, steady and entirely calm. The gaze of something that has no experience of urgency and no intention of acquiring any. A long moment in which neither of you moves and nothing is required, and the village sleeps on all around this small and still point of contact. Then the cat arrives at whatever assessment it makes, turns with the unhurried precision of something that moves exactly as much and as quickly as it chooses to, and no more, and passes between two garden walls and is gone so completely that it might not have been there at all. Might have been something the village was briefly thinking and then let go. The main street opens into the square at the center of the village. It is not a large square, just a widening of the space where several streets meet. A place that the village has organized itself around for a very long time, the public center of a private and self-sufficient community that does not need much public space and uses what it has with the unhurried familiarity of long habit. A bench near the center, a large oak tree beside it, whose trunk is wide enough that it would take two people with outstretched arms to encircle it, whose branches extend outward in every direction and then downward, the outer branches hanging low, their ends bare in the winter, their intricate and repeated subdivision visible against the sky above as a pattern of increasing delicacy, from the thick, dark trunk to the heavy main branches, to the medium branches, to the thin ones, to the very thin ones at the tips where the pattern becomes too fine to follow individually and resolves into a general softness against the sky. The war memorial near the center of the square, its stone pale in the lamplight, the fresh flowers at its base whose colors the dark has taken, leaving only their shapes, the stems still upright, the petals still holding their arrangement, someone's care made present, even here at this hour in this empty square. The bench beside the oak tree is slightly damp. The wood is solid, cold through the coat, where it contacts the back of the thighs, and worn smooth on its upper surfaces by years of accumulated sitting. Generations of the village sitting here in all weathers, and all seasons, and all states of mind. All of it compressed into the smoothness of the grain under the hands, into the particular way the wood has worn in the places where it is most touched. The oak tree stands beside the bench at a distance that feels companionable without being close, large enough and old enough to be simply a presence rather than a thing to be assessed, its roots deep in the dark earth beneath the square's paving, working their slow and patient work of deepening, its branches high and still in the windless air above. Through the branches, the sky is visible in pieces, the branches dividing the sky into irregular shapes that change as the eye moves through them, each shape holding a different arrangement of what is above. The clouds have moved on, the rain clouds, that were here all evening, having taken themselves east or north, or wherever the weather goes when it leaves, and the sky that remains is almost clear. Stars in the gaps between the branches, not many. The village's ambient light, modest as it is, washes out the fainter ones. But the stronger ones, the ones that are present even in competition with the lights below, are there. Steady, very far away, entirely indifferent to the village and the square and the bench, and the person sitting on it, which is part of what makes them restful to look at through the bare branches of an oak tree at midnight. Nothing moves anywhere in the square. No traffic from any direction. No sound from any of the houses that face the square. No voice, no television, no music. The very distant call of an owl somewhere to the north. One note offered to the dark without urgency, neither asking nor answering anything, just present for a moment, and then not present, and the square returns to its complete and settled quiet. The quiet of a place that has been accumulating quiet for a very long time and is very good at it. There is no need to be anywhere else. This bench, this tree, this square, this particular arrangement of dark and lamplight and still air, and the few stars visible between the bare branches. This is entirely and completely sufficient. Nothing is missing. Nothing needs to be added or changed or improved. This is what it is, and it is enough, and it is in its particular way, which is a quiet and unhurried and easily overlooked way, entirely beautiful. A light appears in an upstairs window of one of the houses facing the square. A pale, warm rectangle behind closed curtains. The light pressing through the fabric and casting the room within into a warm and indistinct glow. Someone awake in the night, up for water or for the bathroom, or simply awake for a few minutes, in the way that people are sometimes awake in the middle of the night, lying there or standing in the lit room for a few minutes before sleep returns, which it usually does if you don't resist it, if you allow it to come back in its own time. The light holds for a few minutes, then it goes off. The house returns its window to darkness. The square is as dark as before, as quiet as before, as entirely itself as before. Standing eventually, without any particular reason for standing now rather than later. Just the body's own sense that it is time to move. That the bench has given what it had to give this evening, and the walking can continue. A slow walk across the square, past the memorial with its flowers whose colors are invisible, past the oak tree whose roots are in the dark earth below the paving, through the far side of the square and into the lane that leads down toward the lower part of the village. The lane narrows quickly as it descends. The houses here are older, their stone darker and their walls thicker, set further back behind deeper gardens that are invisible now in the dark, but present in their smells. Damp earth, compost, the particular smell of a garden in late autumn that has been rained on, the smell of things breaking down slowly into other things, which is what gardens do when the growing season is over. The hedges on either side of the lane grow higher as it descends, closing over the lane in places. The sky visible only in a narrow strip above. The stars fewer here because the lane is narrower, and the hedges are taller. The footsteps are very quiet on the damp tarmac. The lane is darker here, the street lamps more widely spaced. The distances between their pools of light longer. The dark between them more complete. In the darker stretches between lamps, the lane is navigable by the paleness of the road surface ahead. Just enough lighter than the hedges on either side to follow, just enough to trust. The lane descends to a small stone bridge over the stream that runs through the lower part of the village. The stream is audible before the bridge is visible, a continuous quiet sound, water moving over stones in the dark. The sound varying slightly as the stream narrows and widens over its bed, louder over the shallower sections where the water moves faster, and the stones are closer to the surface, quieter in the deeper pools where the water is slower and darker. It has been making this sound since long before the village existed. The bridge was built across it at some point, the stone chosen and placed by hands that are long gone, the arch constructed to carry the lane, and whatever crossed the lane across the water below. And the stream continued, making its sound below the bridge, as it had before, and has since, and will continue to for a very long time. The parapet of the bridge is worn smooth at the top, from years of hands resting on it, exactly as yours rests on it now, looking down at the water below, visible in the dark, mostly as movement, the surface of the stream catching fragments of the lamplight, from the lamp at the near end of the bridge, and briefly reflecting them, before the current carries them away, and replaces them with others, a constant renewal of small and momentary reflections. The sound of the water is very present from here, closer and more detailed than it was from the lane above. The individual sounds within it distinguishable. The higher sound of a shallow rapid section to the right. The lower sound of a deeper and slower section. Beneath the bridge itself, the occasional small sound of a stone being moved by the current. Or perhaps that is something else. some small creature of the water going about its nocturnal business, entirely indifferent to the bridge above. The air near the water is cooler and carries a particular quality of freshness, not the freshness of wind, but the freshness of moving water, something that the stream gives to the air above it as the water passes over the stones, a clean and slightly cold quality that fills the lungs differently from the air a little further away. A full breath taken here is a different breath from a full breath taken in the square above. A long breath in, a long breath out. The stream continues. The bridge is still. The village sleeps in every direction around this small, cold point of standing on a stone bridge in the dark, listening to water. Further along the lane, past the bridge, the houses give way to a small recreation ground that opens on the right, a flat space that feels large after the enclosed lane. A football pitch with its white lines faded to something closer to gray. The grass of the pitch longer than it would be in season. The goalposts at either end standing in the dark, with the patient uselessness of structures built for a purpose that is seasonal and is not the current season. A small pavilion along one side, its corrugated iron roof glistening uniformly with accumulated moisture. A row of young trees along the far boundary, planted perhaps a decade ago, still thin enough that their individual branches are visible even in this light. Their silhouettes against the sky, more delicate than the oak in the square, more recently arrived, their roots still establishing themselves in this particular soil. The sky above the recreation ground is more open than it was in the lane or the square. More stars visible here, away from the street lamps of the main road. The cleared sky continuing to clear, or perhaps the eyes continuing to adjust to the dark. The fainter stars becoming present in the way that things become present when the conditions for seeing them are met. Not appearing, exactly, just becoming visible, having been there all along, waiting for the right quality of attention. A low wall along one edge of the recreation ground. Sitting on it, the stone cold immediately through the coat. The field open in front, the hedge behind. The sky above, the village invisible beyond the hedge. The body is still. The breath is slow and even. The stars are doing what stars do, which is to be there, steady and very far away, making no demands. Something in this, the cold wall, the open field, the cleared sky, the sleeping village just out of sight, puts everything into a proportion that is difficult to achieve anywhere else in any other circumstances. Not a diminishment, just a proportion. The day and its contents against the width of this field and the height of this sky and the depth of this quiet, which is considerable, which is the depth of a field on the edge of a sleeping village at midnight, with nothing between you and the stars but the cleared air of a winter night. Standing eventually, walking back across the recreation ground, past the goalposts, past the pavilion, back through the gate and into the lane, over the bridge, the stream still making its sound below, still moving its water over its stones, still doing what it does, regardless of whether anyone is listening from a bridge above, which is fine, which is exactly as it should be, back up the lane through the narrowing hedges, and back into the wider streets of the village, back past the older, darker houses, back through the square where the oak tree stands in the windless dark, beside the bench, its branches absolutely still, its roots deep and patient, the memorial with its invisible colored flowers, the bench where you sat, receiving the lamp's orange light on its damp upper surface, back along the main street with its sequence of lamplight pools on the wet pavement, its sleeping houses, its drawn curtains, its dark windows, its quiet gardens, its roses resting their damp heads over the low walls. The walk is finishing itself. The body has made its assessment and communicated it through the slowing of the feet, and the heaviness of the eyes, and the evenness of the breath, and the softness of the thoughts, which are no longer quite thoughts, but something looser and lighter, and less insistent, something that moves with the footsteps without requiring anything, that drifts with the breath without going anywhere, that is present without being particular, that is here without asking what here is. The village is very still. The night is very quiet. The street lamps make their soft orange circles on the wet pavement, one after another. The same distance apart, the same quality of light, the same soft reflection in the wet road beneath each one. The houses sleep on either side. The roses rest over their walls. The oak tree in the square stands in the dark, with its roots in the earth and its branches in the air, and its centuries of standing in this particular square, entirely evident in its presence and entirely unremarkable to itself. Everything is exactly where it has always been. Everything is at rest. The night holds the village gently and without effort, and the village sleeps, and the road glistens, and the breath is slow, and the feet are quiet on the wet pavement, and the eyes are heavy, and the mind is soft and dispersed, and the dark is kind, and the quiet is complete, and there is nothing left to do, and nowhere to be, and nothing required of anyone, and the walk is over, and the night is still, and the village sleeps on, and the stars above it continue their indifferent and permanent and entirely peaceful arrangements in the dark.